Following the unsuccessful siege of Sparta, a new opportunity arose for Pyrrhus in the city of Argos. At the time, Argos was embroiled in a political conflict between two prominent figures, Aristeus and Aristippus. Given that Aristippus was aligned with Antigonus, Aristeus sought support from Pyrrhus to strengthen his position. Upon receiving Aristeus' request, Pyrrhus promptly abandoned his campaign in Sparta and redirected his forces towards Argos. Upon arriving at Argos, Pyrrhus discovered that Antigonus had already secured the high ground overlooking the plain. The next day, Pyrrhus sent a provocative message to Antigonus, branding him a robber and challenging him to descend to the plain to engage in direct combat for control of the kingdom. Such challenges were a common practice in ancient warfare. For instance, Alexander the Great had similarly challenged Darius before the Battle of Gaugamela. The victor of such a battle could claim legitimacy over the conquered territory, a concept known as spear-won land. This principle served as the foundational legitimacy for the rule of all the successor kingdoms. Antigonus was a far more cautious and pragmatic leader than Pyrrhus, preferring to resolve conflicts through means other than direct military confrontation. Given his recent defeats in Macedonia, Antigonus commanded a significantly smaller army than Pyrrhus. Consequently, he chose to decline Pyrrhus's challenge, instead sending a message that pointedly remarked, "There are many roads to death open to Pyrrhus if he is weary of life." This response reflects Antigonus's strategic mindset and refusal to be drawn into a potentially disadvantageous battle. As the two armies faced each other, the Argives sent emissaries to both kings, requesting that they withdraw and allow the city to maintain its neutrality. Antigonus consented to this request, even offering one of his sons as a hostage to demonstrate his commitment. Pyrrhus also agreed to withdraw, but did so without making a binding promise, which naturally led both the Argives and Antigonus to doubt his sincerity. Various omens had encouraged Pyrrhus to proceed with an attack on the city, but his decision was more realistically driven by his allies within Argos, who had agreed to betray the city by opening one of its gates during the night. Once Antigonus had withdrawn, Pyrrhus set his plan into motion. Under the cover of night, Pyrrhus successfully infiltrated a contingent of his Galatian troops into Argos through the gate that had been secretly opened by his allies. These forces swiftly took control of the city's marketplace. However, the gate's narrow size posed a significant challenge, as it was too small to allow the passage of Pyrrhus's war elephants with their towers attached. The elephant handlers were compelled to dismantle the towers, move the animals through the gate, and then reassemble the towers once inside the city. This process, coupled with the darkness and ensuing confusion, caused significant delays. When the Argives discovered Pyrrhus's attack, they quickly sounded the alarm. Citizens rushed to secure key positions within the city and dispatched urgent messages to Antigonus. Anticipating Pyrrhus's potential deceit, Antigonus had not retreated far and had wisely kept his army on high alert. He swiftly marched back towards Argos, but exercising caution, remained outside the city walls. Instead, he sent a relief force led by one of his sons into the city. Spartan King Arrius also arrived with a contingent of 1,000 lightly armed Spartans and Cretans to support the defense. With their allies' assistance, the Argives launched a counterattack against the Galatian forces. Meanwhile, Pyrrhus had managed to force his way into the city through one of the gymnasiums. His troops raised their battle cry, but the response from the beleaguered Galatians was weak, indicating their struggle to hold their ground. Pyrrhus quickly realized that his Galatian forces were in trouble and pushed his troops forward with greater urgency, sending the cavalry ahead to reinforce them. However, the city's numerous water channels became hazardous obstacles in the darkness, further complicating the advance. As a result, Pyrrhus's forces once again fell into disarray during a nighttime operation. The soldiers, confused by the chaotic conditions, misunderstood their orders, became scattered, and lost their way. Command and control disintegrated on both sides due to the darkness and confusion, causing the intensity of the fighting to diminish. The opposing forces eventually disengaged, allowing for a temporary lull until daybreak. This pause in hostilities provided an opportunity for all sides to regroup and reorganize their forces. As dawn broke and the battlefield became visible, Pyrrhus was taken aback by the unexpectedly large number of enemy forces assembled within the city. His unease was further heightened when he noticed a bronze statue in the marketplace depicting a wolf and a bull locked in combat. This sight reminded him of an ancient oracle that had foretold his death upon witnessing a wolf fighting a bull. The image, which was common in Argos and rooted in the city's founding mythology, deeply unsettled Pyrrhus as he contemplated the ominous significance of the oracle's prophecy in light of the unfolding events. Disheartened by both the ominous sign and the unfavorable progress of the battle, Pyrrhus decided to retreat. However, he was concerned about the narrow city gates hindering his withdrawal. To address this, he sent a messenger to his son, Helenus, instructing him to tear down a section of the city wall to facilitate the retreat and provide cover. Unfortunately, due to the noise of the ongoing battle, the messenger misunderstood the command and instead delivered a message for Helenus to bring reinforcements to aid his father. Helenus, acting on this misinterpreted order, entered the city with the remaining elephants and the elite troops. Meanwhile, Pyrrhus's forces were already in the midst of a retreat. This led to a chaotic situation where Pyrrhus' retreating soldiers collided head-on with Helenus's advancing relief force. Pyrrhus, realizing the error, ordered his troops to turn around and withdraw. However, the effort to reverse the retreat was hampered by the incoming forces, resulting in further confusion and disorder as soldiers attempting to exit the city were blocked by those still entering. To make a bad situation worse, the largest of the elephants had become stuck in the narrow gateway. It lay there, roaring out its distress and blocking the retreat. Another of the elephants that had entered the city had lost its handler. It managed to find its dead rider, and taking him up across its tusks, ran amok through the crowded streets. In its crazed rampage, it trampled many of its own side. These, naturally enough, panicked and bolted in every direction. The Argives took this opportunity to attack the invaders. The Epirots were packed tightly together, unable to defend themselves, and were massacred by the Argives. Those that were able to flee were also so pressed together that they inflicted accidental wounds on each other. Observing the unfolding disaster, Pyrrhus removed the distinctive wreath from his helmet and handed it to one of his bodyguards, signaling a retreat. He then faced the pursuing attackers. Among them was a poor citizen who had been hastily recruited for the defense of the city. This individual managed to inflict a minor wound on Pyrrhus with a spear thrust through his breastplate. Enraged, Pyrrhus turned to confront his assailant with his characteristic battle fury. Meanwhile, the assailant's mother watched from the rooftops. In a desperate bid to aid her son, she threw a tile with remarkable force and precision. The tile struck Pyrrhus on the neck, just below his helmet, inflicting a significant injury. The injury caused Pyrrhus's vision to blur, leading him to drop his reins and fall from his horse near the tomb of Licymnius, a companion of Hercules. Without his distinctive royal insignia, he was largely unrecognizable amidst the chaos of the battle. However, a soldier named Zophorus from Antigonus's army identified him and managed to drag him into a doorway, just as Pyrrhus was beginning to recover from his wound. Zophorus drew his sword with the intent to deliver a fatal blow, but was momentarily paralyzed by the sight of Pyrrhus's fierce glare. Overcome with fear at the gravity of his task, Zophorus's hands trembled. Regaining his composure, he struck at Pyrrhus, but his unsteady hand missed the intended target and instead slashed across Pyrrhus' mouth and chin. After several attempts, Zophorus finally succeeded in severing the king's head. News of Pyrrhus's death quickly spread. Alcyoneus, one of Antigonus's sons, took the slain king's head and rode back to his father. Upon arriving, he presented the head before Antigonus and his commanders. However, rather than showing elation, Antigonus reacted with intense anger. He struck Alcyoneus repeatedly with his staff, denouncing him as impious and barbarous, and drove him away. Antigonus then covered his face in mourning and wept bitterly. The death of Pyrrhus evoked memories of the dramatic reversals of fortune experienced by his own grandfather, Antigonus, and his father, Demetrius. The loss reminded him of the precarious nature of power and the frequent changes in fortune that had affected his family. Antigonus and the Argives achieved a decisive victory in the battle. Following his success, Antigonus captured Pyrrhus's camp and took his son Helenus prisoner. He also recovered Pyrrhus's body, which he prepared for burial in a respectful manner and had cremated. Alcyoneus then brought Helenus, who was dressed in mourning attire, before his father. Antigonus, appreciating his son's more subdued demeanor compared to his previous actions, remarked, "This is better, my son, than what you did before. However, you have still not done well by allowing this mourning clothing to remain, which is a dishonor to us as victors." He then entrusted Helenus with the bones of Pyrrhus, instructing him to transport them back to Epirus for burial.